All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call to order the September 13th meeting of the North Point Park Planning Commission. Warren, if you would assist me with the roll call. A little big, Michelle, today.
I call roll. Commissioner Vitaki. Present. Commissioner Hodges.
Present.
Commissioner Saros. Present. Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Snehecki.
Present.
And Chairman Flynn.
Present.
All right, we do have a quorum presence. Dr. Taylor did communicate she was unable to join us today, so she has Wednesday night classes this semester. So as we talk about our next special meetings we're going to need to have in October, we'll keep that in mind and we'll do that scheduling at the tail end of today's meeting. But a motion to excuse her would be appropriate if somebody feels inclined.
Second. I guess, can I second? I
Yeah,
can
you
second,
can.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, the motion passes.
Well, we can say all those in favor.
Oh, all those in favor, we should do the actual vote. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right, our first agenda item after our roll call is the approval of the meeting minutes. I assume all the commissioners have had a chance to review the minutes from the prior meeting. It was included in our informational packet. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 8th, 2023?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved. So that brings us on swiftly then to item number 4, the public comment on agenda items. Are there any members of the public who would like to offer comment on the agenda items today? Going once, going twice, seeing no hands. All right. And so we'll move on to item 5, unfinished business, and that is the zoning ordinance review. We've got representatives here from McKenna. At this point, I would probably toss the ball over to them and let them run.
Yeah,
Right?
Yes, today, commissioners, we have our consultants from McKenna. We have Michael Betcher and then Mara.
Rachishevsky, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Yes. They've been hard at work working with our team behind the scenes, myself, Terry Brennan, Lydia, and Sean in our building department. And we've got a bunch of draft chapters to go through today. It's not an entire ordinance. We do have a few chapters that are left that we'll be reviewing, and I'll look to actually get a special meeting in October scheduled to finish up those remaining chapters. McKenna assured me they were going to be able to get those chapters done for whenever we set our next meeting, as long as it's not first week of October or second, since I got some vacation days planned then. But otherwise, they're here today. I'm going to turn it over to them, and then for you guys go. And we do have the laptop ready to go in case we need to look at any maps or anything. So
you've got print copies of the map too. All right. Go up, or are we okay?
yeah, if you want to stand at the podium, you can. Yeah, it's better to hear though with the microphone, so either scooch the table closer, we may have to say that. Okay. So we do broadcast our meetings.
Well,
so.
I did get some feedback from the council meeting that it was difficult for the public to hear
Okay.
anybody who wasn't projecting, so I encouraged my fellow commissioners to project. And then also anybody in the audience, so yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as just moving your desk forward, so you don't, but just making sure. Where is it?
They're all those four.
So these are all the
Yeah.
mics.
All right, well, we can speak up front.
So where is it best? We just move this here, or where do people usually perform their comments?
The podium's usually
Close.
kind of centered up here,
Yeah.
but it's
You
gonna
wanted to
move out to the
stay,
side.
was that your goal to stay sitting and
Oh,
on your desk?
here.
Because if you do that and get as close as you can and then project.
Here, we can do this.
And,
Perfect.
you know, somebody might text saying they can't hear. If so, community text 313-815. And we will make sure you can hear us because this is important discussion. I did. City service, right?
Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here to this meeting. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Mara Rachishevsky. Nice to meet you. I'm a senior planner with McKenna, and I've been brought on by the project manager, Michael Betcher. And we're here to talk to you about our zoning ordinance update so far. You're familiar with the zoning ordinance? You have some time to look into this? You've got your own questions too. Okay, so we have our memo that we created in front of you that provides a summary of changes. And we have some teasing questions for you as we continue to write this ordinance. We also want to hear from you. And then do we have a certain city manager? Did you say that you wanted to start with the administrative section?
I figured it would be easiest to just kind of do the high level of the admin chapters, because those are more, less just, our bread and butter processes for, hey, here's how we do special land use, here's how we do site plan, here's who enforces this thing. It's all the things that we're missing now,
Okay,
well laid out review processes. So just maybe starting with those, because I'm anticipating there'll be fewer questions or comments as
Okay.
opposed to the, hey, what can we do where?
all right, does that sound okay? You guys review the administrative processes and then we'll go into the land use map and the table of uses? Okay,
Good.
great. So what administrative process should we start with?
So, well, the two articles that we received most recently have to do with that. One, Article 12, the text and map amendments. Article that was one of our drafted. And then Article 16 as well, administration and enforcement. I think the memo would sort of give the highlight of what those are about.
Okay, so I can take away Article 12 and then we can do 16.
Okay.
And then I can skip, or do you want to start with also zoning plan reviews? Before we do 16?
Go ahead.
Okay, great, yeah, that might make the foundation a little bit more. Okay, so Article 12, great, page 13, Article 12 of the memo, thank you.
Page 4 of the packet.
Oh, 104 of the packet. Thank you. All right, so previously, the city did not have a text amendment, map amendment process within the zoning ordinance. So we outlined the procedures and approval standards within this section. And we also created the opportunity to have a conditional rezoning. And we like conditional rezonings as opposed to just a special land use we still offer special land uses, but we like, or just offering rezonings because what if you have someone who wants to open up an ice cream shop in a residential neighborhood? So it's a corner parcel, it's zoned commercial, but they want to open up an ice cream shop. And we kind of think that that makes sense for the area. However, if we open it up to all like general commercial uses, then we would open it up for the previous owner or the future owner, if it ever changes hands, to open up perhaps like a bar or a restaurant, which drives more traffic and has different hours than we would want in our residential district. So a conditional rezoning allows for an applicant to bring forward their idea of their business and offer conditions like, okay, we're gonna just keep it as an ice cream shop. This rezoning will only be an ice cream shop forever. You're only approving an ice cream shop if there's change in arms. It's always an ice cream shop. So that's the example that we give. And we were wondering if the city's interested in having a process like this.
I think that makes sense. I don't think there's too many parcels across the city where we're gonna run into this, but I do think there are a couple that would make sense depending on what the use is. So I think, if I understand this correctly, the conditional approval would give the power to council, everyone to choose if this use is permitted or not for this one parcel.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So in our ice cream shop example, right?
yes.
Now, ice cream shop goes out of business, a new ice cream shop could open, but if you're gonna change the use of that, then there would have to be an additional conditional approval for that other business use, correct?
Yes, that would be the next, that would be the next process.
I'm sorry, removal of.
Or the removal of the condition.
In terms of like replacing it with a permanent rezoning or bringing back to like the tradition of prior zoning, okay?
And they would bring the process in effect again, so it would have to be another conditional rezoning or just a rezoning.
Right. So our example of that is Fairfax Market, right? So I think we're on R3 zoning. Is what Fairfax is currently being proposed as on the corner of Beaconsfield and Fairfax there.
Would it be helpful to have the map up if we could, do you want to guide where that is? So we can follow.
On Beaconsfield and Fairfax, south.
I think for this one, we all know where Fairfax is. And it is currently zoned residential too on the current zoning map and the proposed one. So that's an excellent location for this type of.
Right. And then across the street, north side of the street, their parking lot too.
Yeah.
So,
You do have a version of a conditional zoning in on Kirchhoff near Wakefield with the Commons project, the condition is that the part of the project happen in Detroit.
Yeah.
To allow this rezoning.
Right.
We did it.
Is that as much a conditional rezoning as so much as a conditional approval of, or I guess is there that sort of like a distinction, not a difference? It's because we didn't necessarily say with that it was, right, rezoning on the condition that it remains X, right? We were saying that
It was, so
it's
the,
approved under the condition that, right?
yeah, I can address that. And one thing we point out with conditional rezonings, is all the conditions are proposed by the applicant voluntarily. Yeah, there's some wiggle room to encourage certain conditions, but at the end of the day, the applicant is unwilling to put forth a condition and sign their name to it, that, yeah, I offered this voluntarily. That's where you can get in trouble. But yes, we have done conditional rezonings. That was because we actually have a parking zoning district. You'll notice we don't have a dedicated zoning district for parking anymore. So procedurally, yes, that is because those were residential lots before and they didn't want to construct the parking lot. It was an actual rezoning process, but because we know it was a cross-border thing, we encouraged them and they did to put forth those voluntary conditions. So we've actually have, most of the people on this commission have actually gone through a conditional rezoning process before. The difference now is we actually have hey, here's how the process works written down in our ordinance versus just, how we had to deal with it before. Because under Michigan law, you can, even if we didn't have a process in place, they could still offer the conditions. So it's best to have them in here. But did that answer the question, Devin, with just kind of the situation there? So that specific one wouldn't happen under this new ordinance because we don't have a different zoning district for parking.
So would that go through the ZBA or be administratively?
A
That's a good
rezoning,
question.
Well, for the conditional, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be public hearing at the planning commission,
Okay.
and then city council would approve it, just like any other text.
That's what we did
But
last
not
time.
as a-
Amendment.
yeah, no, the zoning board is not for this type of thing.
And I like your parallel to this conversation with the variance, where the CBA oversees all the variances. So within our city, we would use a dimensional variance only and not a use variance, because a use variance gives all the powers to the ZBA without a public hearing or deliberation from the planning commission or city council through two text readings. They have the power to automatically assign a new use, which, as we know, follows spot zoning. Spot zoning becomes so if we engage in a use variance, then the parcel will be in essence spot zoned. So that's why conditional rezonings are beneficial, and it's a nice tool for the city to have. Okay, are we comfortable to move on? Great. So I think the next item we want to chat about was,
Article 16.
Right.
So administration and enforcement, it's, someone has to ensure that the ordinance is being followed properly. So we get laid out who does what in the process. The city council, of course, adopts the final zoning ordinance, sets fees for planning commission work, things like that. The planning commission will formulate the zoning ordinance at the maps and that goes to city council for their approval. Excuse me. It needs to be reviewed every 5 years, of course, and the planning commission conducts development review and has the authority in the new zoning ordinance for final approval of special land uses. And that was something important. And zoning board of appeals can hear appeals on decisions by administrative decisions or by the planning commission or public services director. If they say no to something, it can be appealed to the board of zoning appeals. The board may reverse or affirm fully or partially that decision. The board can approve dimensional variances, as Mara mentioned as well. And then, of course, public services, the director of public services or whoever that person designates is responsible for enforcing and enacting certain tasks, including recommending the granting of occupancy permits to the building department, inspecting and reporting non-conforming uses.
I have a question for that, Michael. Did we get that right? Is it the director of public services that oversees the first plot plans or procedures within here? Okay, so not the building official.
Yeah, and the good thing is the way this ordinance is worded, is, it funnels to the city manager, their duly authorized representative, and then it further articulates the director of public service, which our charter is super old. You don't really have a set, that position really is kind of been absorbed. But for right now, we need to, city manager would be the Department of Public Service. This is the director. So the way this is written won't cause any sort of who does what, on our end. I do want to point out, just to clarity, and like I know Laura, you're also new, the zoning board of appeals in Grosse Pointe Park is the city council. So
Okay.
just add some
Wow,
nuances
it's
to
a lot of duties, a lot of hats.
it does add nuances, and that is in the city charter, not this, that it needs to be that way.
And so you'd like to continue?
That's something we can maybe talk about another time, but for now, we're absent a charter change, vote of the people amendments. The city council is,
Okay.
going to serve for the ZBA and at least foreseeable future, or the near term.
And Chair, if I may, is it okay if I ask and address?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Is that something that you'd like to continue, or do you want to add flexible language? Like, if the charter were to change, then the ZBA is its own entity, so you don't have to update the zoning ordinance.
That's I think it would be helpful to write it that way.
Okay.
For sure, to just to procedurally not have us to change it later, but, we'll definitely run that by the city attorney's office too, to make sure that they're comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you.
So we have chapters coming up specifically on the planning commission and the zoning board of appeals, so that'll be, in more detail, exactly what they're allowed to do, they're charged to do, that kind of thing, but at least in administration and enforcement, you kind of have an idea, an overall idea of how things should be together.
I can talk about those.
Okay.
Okay, we're comfortable moving on? Great, so page 10 of the memo. Can you help me out, is that a packet?
Yeah,
Flip a couple pages back. Zoning plan reviews. So we'll talk about zoning plan reviews and then special land uses and then go into the zoning mapping use table. Okay. So again, we made a clear process because we heard you guys from the January meeting that you need a clear development review process. So we're calling them zoning plan reviews because usually cities call them site plan reviews. However, we're adding another layer of a plan review to Grosse Pointe Park. So we have the administrative plot plan, which is more administrative review. It gives the discretion for the Director of Public Services to sign off on minor projects, and I'll go into what we define as minor projects. And then we have our Planning Commission site plans. So we differentiate between the plot plan, the administrative plot plan, and then the Planning Commission site plan. That's why we call it zoning plan reviews. So some of the projects within the administrative plot plan you can see in the first column, and I can go through some. So the renovation or construction of one or two family structure. This is per Michigan state law that we only need to require administrative plot plans to help with the housing shortage and create more homes. So that is number one. We also have construction of an accessory structure, changing in height that doesn't add floor area. And then here's a key one of how we define minimal or minor projects is minor modifications are defined as a change to an existing building. I'm reading on the fourth bullet, last sentence, that does not increase the footprint by more than 25%. So these are another minor projects that the Director of Public Services would have the opportunity to oversee. Are you guys comfortable with that definition of minor project? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then we have the reuse, reoccupancies, that's typical for a building department to oversee or Director of Public Services. Temporary uses, exterior site improvements, these are all minor in nature, like the modification of a parking resurfacing or landscape updates. These are all basic items that building departments already oversee, or departments of public services.
You can just say building department.
Okay, thanks. I can do both.
I do.
Hey,
If a multifamily building, like a 2-unit building, were to add a unit, does that fall to try to become a 3-unit building? Does that fall into this category then?
That's a good question. We would say additions. So let me see.
Change use and occupancy.
If there's no addition or if there's
No addition. So there's a number of different 2-unit and even 4-unit buildings
Mhm.
that have a huge attic, third floor, that could easily be an additional unit.
So we have in our first bullet, construction of 1 or 2 family structures up to 4 units.
Yeah, I read that as, when I read that, I would say like, what you're talking about, right, would fall under, administrative plot plans.
Yeah, I'm reading that says if it's up to 4 units, not if you're going to add a unit.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
I view it as a renovation of a building up to 4 units.
Yeah, I see that too.
Yeah.
Do you have any language that you'd like to be more comfortable with?
Well, I guess because I think if this new proposed zoning map, this is what we're looking at, where we're gonna increase density on certain streets. I think most near-term implication of this is gonna be developers, property owners adding 1 or 2 additional units to the current footprint of the property. And so then, what bucket does that fall under? I think we just need to clearly define that.
Are you looking for a policy that says, renovations, construction not to exceed 4 units? Is that what you're
I guess what I'm asking is that still fall, this would, in your eyes, this follows the same, this would just be a administrative plot plan in that scenario.
So the way I read it would be, oh, go ahead.
I was wondering, and just hearing you both talk about this, is the way to view this essentially as anything that does not fall under the purview of a planning commission site plan review, right? So new construction or special planning process, or some sort of, I guess, intensifies.
Right, I guess I'm saying is that would this process require more of an intensive review?
Right.
Just-
But we are essentially, are we aligned, I guess, on the idea that if it does not fall under the purview of the planning commission site plan review, right, it would certainly, be required for an administrative plot plan review. Is that the right way to look at it as, it's either or essentially, right? If
I guess that's my question too,
Yeah.
is it a site plan review or a plot plan review based on the project?
Yes, there's 2 buckets for review.
And those encompass
Okay,
everything.
so that's, I
Yes.
guess it's what I'm asking is, which bucket would that scenario fall under if you're adding an additional unit?
Okay, so we do have language on page 11 that says all projects require planning commission site plans unless specified. And within the planning commission examples of site plan projects, we have that any projects involving special planning processes must abide by the planning commission site plan process flowchart. I don't know if that answered it, is that clarifying?
I guess the question probably comes down to, right, whether the hypothetical situation you raised is an intensified use.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So it's almost the definition.
Well, I
guess,
think
of-
one way or another it should be clearly stated, is if you are changing use and occupancy to add an additional unit, which bucket is it?
Yeah.
I think
That's also governed by the.
I feel what you're saying. What would you like to establish as the minimum units for the situation?
Well, I'm just like, so the example of you have a 2-unit building and you add a third apartment.
Is the area that apartment is in, right, is it zone for?
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
Right, because I think that would essentially,
It would have to
because if
be in
it's,
that.
if it's exceeding that, right, then it would essentially be a
Right.
variance
It'd
request,
have to
right?
be
It
in that.
would, by definition, fall under the purview of the planning commission to review it, correct?
Yes, it wouldn't, but we don't oversee use variances. So the city of Grosse Pointe Park does not have use variances within their ordinance. So they would actually have to apply for a rezoning
Right.
or a conditional rezoning
Right.
Well,
Which would then,
or a text amendment.
right, but a rezoning would be reviewed by the planning commission,
Yes.
yes.
But if you're in an NR3 district and you have a 2-unit and you add a third unit, you would not be changing, so you wouldn't need a zoning change. True. Right? So
that would fall under the building department, right?
Yeah.
Which, I don't know what the rest of the group feels, but to me, that feels appropriate, right? Because otherwise we're weighing in on, from a volume standpoint, right, essentially every multifamily construction, right? To keep it as only when there's a case of a zoning variance, right? Like if we get tipped from a two-family, I always forget that, or 2 versus 3, but you know, into a zoning variance, right, that would require us to.
So I think that makes, so I think it makes sense in this scenario, if you're in an NR3 district, it should fall under plot plan. In this scenario.
I think we sorted it out, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice job, guys. That was fun, all right.
I think we'll get more clarity when we talk about the use table and where multifamily and what the density is.
I'm here for this conversation. Okay, cool.
There are also minimum, unit sizes, you know, right, that may govern, you know, if the 3rd floor isn't large enough.
Yeah, right, that could be out, right.
Okay, so within this table, I want to point out the content. So the contents are a little different, the requirements for a plot plan versus site plan. And we have, for a plot plan, they have to be drawn to scale. And the criteria is listed, I guess, within the zoning ordinance. But the thing that I want to point out is the planning commission has to have a stamped, signed, sealed, delivered plan by a licensed architect, engineer, builder, landscape surveyor, like these are all slashes, and landscape architect. We found that it is really helpful for site plans to have a stamp by a landscape architect to show that the developer and the property owner know what to read our landscaping section and actually perform these duties, because a lot of conversations with planning commission and between the planner gets hung up on performing landscaping requirements. That's something that's left out. So do you guys like adding that seal of the landscape architect on your plans?
For,
For planning commission site plans?
I think it's.
It's a plus.
Are you a landscape
Yes.
architect?
No, my father was.
Okay.
And from the admin side, I think that's a smart move too. And I just like having the tables of standards. What's required in the site plan.
I'm just thinking of like what's really dominated the discussion that we've had, right, around, right, planning commission, so much that does pertain to the landscape is really how folks that interact with their neighbors, right? And so I think it's important that I think have that consideration laid out.
Okay, and so if you like tables and you like our flow chart, on page 85 of your packet, we first have review submission for completeness. Actually, we're gonna flip that to be underneath submit zoning plan application. So first, we'll start off with attend pre-development meeting. All right, and then we go to the submit zoning plan application, then we review submission for completeness, staff reviews, zoning plan authority reviews, and we have our continuous process flow. Do you want me to share it on the screen here? Or talk it through? Do we have any suggestions?
So is the intent of this flow chart, if it falls under the administrative plot plan category, this would all be done by a city official?
Yes.
Whereas if it was planning commission, then it would be done by, or it would be done by the planning commission, obviously. At what point does the planning commission get involved in this flow chart if it's a planning commission project?
Thank you. That's your question. So when you see staff reviews and then we go down to zoning plan authority review and action, this is when planning commission would get involved or the,
So the one who would have the zoning authority
yes.
in that case, or director of public services.
Exactly. Thank you. So it's either planning commission or director of public services. If you want, we can add those names within the box.
I think that would
Okay.
clarify a little bit for someone that's reading this without context.
Yes, it's a great suggestion.
Because at least use kind of consistent verbiage, right, that you would see if. Because if I'm going to make a modification to my property, right, want to understand, right, where I come before planning commission or just building department. I think that's,
Sure.
Yeah.
You're searching for those words. It's a good point. Thank you.
Maybe you can just do a footnote too. That might be easier depending on how much room you've got on the table. You can't put the
Okay.
words planning commission, then you could do the footnote thing and list, it's this.
The reviewing authorities, yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. All here for improvements. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming in tonight. Thanks for having me again. Okay, so then we can approve with conditions, continue the flow chart, submit a revised zoning plan, and receive approval. Submit revised construction plan, and we continue to pull work permits, schedule inspections, receive certificate of occupancy. Is that relevant for Grosse Pointe Park's flow? Okay. Receive business license and open your business or enjoy your new building.
maybe just make receive business license if applicable, right? Just in the event that it's
You
residential.
can probably just take it off entirely.
Right.
Okay.
That's,
I mean, if we ever do away with business licensing.
So I put it in there because sometimes people don't know, they need a business
Yeah, right.
license. They think that they got a planning commission approval. If it's a special land use, they went through city council and then they're all ready to open, but they actually have more departments to work within.
I would just leave that little
That's fine.
key legend in there on that one, right? That you have for if applicable in the
Yeah,
legend.
why don't we just do
Yeah.
that?
Got it.
You already got it there.
Okay.
But no, I think this alone is a huge improvement versus.
Oh, yeah, I wish I could have shown you that in the past.
I've seen it.
All right, so something that Michael and I were talking about before this meeting is something we want to bring to you guys too. Some committee or cities are moving in the direction to allow the Director of Public Services to have even more authority over final reviews if a site plan is an automatically permitted use. Is that something that this commission is comfortable with? And so then the planning commission would oversee site plans that are attached to special land uses only.
I thought that's what we already did. Like, I didn't know we were sort of in the business of reviewing site plans that were already conforming to the zoning ordinance. I'm not
No,
particularly.
that is kind of how we do things. Now, our ordinance is so out of date that there's only a few things that are special land uses that would come before as a site plan, approval. I'm thinking, the Scott Center development. Otherwise, there really hasn't been anything of, substance, or the parking lot, you could argue, though that should have probably been one to come before. But otherwise, if someone's just tearing down a building and rebuilding like another structure, that's like, those are permitted uses. So those normally all
Right.
fall under the zoning official, or in this case, Director of Public Service.
I guess that's,
So I'm just saying what she's kind of proposing isn't really different from how we do things now. It's just what is marked with an S in the land use table as a special land use.
Yeah, as long as it's conforming, yeah, right, just.
Which
Keep it
shouldn't,
simple.
that's sort of what was going through my head as we were looking at the zoning, or the flow a minute ago, shouldn't there be two tracks? One that goes purely through an internal administrative review and gets to the finish line, and then what might trigger it going to planning commission?
Yeah.
And so there should be the two tracks,
Yeah,
rather
and,
than,
and the decider about which track is whether it's a conforming use or not. I mean, not necessarily whether it's up to 40 units or something, because there could be areas where 4 units is not conforming. And so that would automatically not be an administrative plot review, that would be a variance that would be reviewed.
I found in section 11.2, I got 64 in the packet that you sent out, page 64. You talk about the approval standards of special land use, and I appreciate seeing that, because I don't think we had something along those lines
No, we
before.
didn't.
But I also, when I interpreted this, I read it as, when there is a proposal for special land use, which I would assume in this case would a rezoning or something along those lines, right, would fall under this, or no? Is a
We have
rezoning?
different standards for rezoning in here.
Okay.
And if the rezoning was for a special land use, that special land use, these standards would apply.
These standards are, I guess my point is, I feel like these standards do a good job bringing the onus upon whoever's applying for the special land use to prove that none of these things are, that that it is compatible, right, that it is consistent, that it has minimal impact.
Mhm.
I feel like it just, because if we don't feel as a planning commission that that's being done, right, with the proposal that's brought forward, which is obviously gonna include a site plan, they always have, right, then we can either postpone the approval. I feel like that's a way to prevent us from having to basically oversee, right, the building department's approval of an actual site plan. That's the way it read to me when I looked through it. I don't know if that's like the right interpretation that you guys are going for or not.
Yes, well, we appreciate you looking over the approval standards and thank you, that was one of our future questions, so we got them right. But I also hear from over here, we want to separate the two flows in like the flow chart into two separate processes, so administrative and planning commission. Then also, so thank you for that feedback. Also though, what I previously presented within this table, when I talked about the minor modification, it's 25% or more. So we'd have to scratch that table and give perhaps, say all site plans are overseen by the Director of Public Services, except if they're a planned unit development or special land use. That seems like how you're operating.
Right, but, yeah.
Well, how do we have this conversation?
So
I'm not against it, if it's more than 25% to send it here. It's again, what the commission kind of thinks is, what is it? It's your review kind of. And again, the one thing to keep in mind with site plans is if it meets this, if special land use isn't in the equation, if they check every box
Right.
on the site plan, you legally have to approve it anyway,
That's fair.
if it's a site plan review.
Right.
Special land use and rezonings are different.
Yeah,
But if it's, that's why, again, there is a movement to if it checks all the technical boxes, so to speak.
So we don't even need the language regarding if it's an addition more than 25% of the current footprint, because if it's within the current zoning, then they have the right to do it.
right.
So we can even simplify that further.
Exactly. It would be probably no table and just, yeah, like I said, all projects require, or all projects overseen by the Director of Public Services unless they're a special planning project such as planning and development or special land use.
And special land use,
Yeah, just
something like a
rezoning.
gas station, for example.
Yeah, I think that's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good clarity today.
because I do think, right, we definitely don't want planning commission to all of a sudden be, over the shoulder of the building department. Right, that's right,
Yeah, especially if you guys wanna meet in summer when we get all our building permits.
right. It's been a while since we've last met anyway, so I think we'd have a lot of upset, residents.
That'd be atypical. Well, right, with our peers.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah, no, what we have now is largely good on this end, but the helpful thing is having the standards.
Yes.
So whatever the person has to make the decision, whether it's just looking at the site plan for building code compliance or yourselves, it's good to have the standards laid out.
Okay, do you feel comfortable moving to special land uses? Cool, thank you. All right, so page 12 of the memo, I'm gonna go off this one because it appears that these are the most updated approval standards. So 1 through 8, these list our approval standards. Have you had the opportunity to look over these? Do you want me to go through each one or just offer a minute for any feedback, if we got those right?
These are also, we need to touch on them.
Yeah, I just offered more direct language in the memo. So compatibility with adjacent uses, consistency with the master plan, these are all basic standards of operation for every city or municipality. Adequate service by central public facilities, it doesn't impact pedestrian or vehicle traffic, it doesn't establish a nuisance, it improves the community, and it protects residential character if applicable, and it aligns with the zoning ordinance. Okay, my pressing question for this section is, who do you want to have as the final review authority of special land uses? Some cities have their city council, some cities have planning commission. And if we think about it, if we offer a city council meeting, and this is up to you what your level of comfort is, but we have the developer in the room, the developer's here for a public meeting, maybe it's a special land use, so that's required. And they come to planning commission, talk it all out, you guys might table their item, and they come to another meeting again for the planning commission to revisit this, and then they have to go to city council again, talk it out and rehash again. So I just want to point out the perspective of cities changing that policy, having one conversation with the business owners and being a little bit more efficient in the process, but it's still the level of comfort of where your city is today.
I'd like to speak first on this one. We do, currently special land uses are only approved at the planning commission level. So they currently are not going again to the city council. In communities I've worked at, that's kind of how we've been doing it. It seems to work. Seems to work well, especially when our city council only meets once per month. We meet at most every other month. You know, we don't want to drag things out too long, but we also want to be fair for the community that, hey, look, we're the body tasked with these standards. We went through them, we feel like they are met. And another reason why I like this is because our council serves as the zoning board of appeals. So in the event that somebody wants to appeal your decision on a special land use, they would go to the city council anyway.
It's a different venue.
Yes, so I think from a separation of powers, you know, best practice, and also it's what we've been doing now currently.
Yeah.
You guys are on it, thanks. All right, well, we can move from administrative processes and into the zoning map and land use table. Does that make sense, City Manager, Chair?
Sure.
That's good?
I just use it.
Oh, assistant city manager, sorry. I wonder where you kept like smiling at me.
Our city manager is.
Further out.
Oh. Oh. Sorry, I was referring.
sitting back here.
Well, thank
You
you
have
guys.
public comment?
We're having a good time.
Not public comment.
Michael, do you want to take it away?
Well, on document page 6 of the packet, we went through, actually it might be in the middle as well, isn't it?
Page 4?
Page 1 memo?
I think we should go over the districts first before we go over the uses.
Sure.
I think that's
Yeah,
page
that's
4
what I
of
was
the
gonna
memo.
go.
Page 4 of the memo.
And that outlines the newly proposed zoning districts. We have a civic district for public uses, parks, municipal facilities, schools, religious institutions. And then we've renamed the residential zones. Estate residential stays the same. Those are for the largest houses on the largest lots. Neighborhood residential 1, 2, and 3. And they increase in density as the numbers go up. So NR3 would be for places like Cabbage Patch. And in the description, you can kind of read a little bit about them. ER and NR1 would be primarily single family. NR2 allows duplexes, NR3 allows townhouses and above that. The commercial zones, we have 3 new categories: neighborhood mixed use, central business district, and corridor mixed use. And those sort of correlate with the different streets and the different conditions essentially. CBD would be most appropriate on Kirchhoff. Neighborhood mixed use for Jefferson and Charlevoix, and corridor mixed use on that. And then a transition district, and you'll see that on the map. We're hoping that this can maybe sort of help out where, particularly along Kirchhoff, where there's parking pressure, there's interest in creating new lots, things like that. A way to transition if that's necessary that allows for a mix of uses. As a transition zone between commercial strips and residential neighborhoods behind them. So, pulling up the map.
I'm pulling up the intent statements to make sure that we are adequately defining our different districts. Is that a talking point that you wanted to?
That's, pretty much what we had been talking about. We went through them. And any questions on those? Did you have a chance to kind of look through? And does that make sense? Those make sense?
that makes sense.
Okay. Sorry. So, should we go into the map?
Yeah, I think so.
Welcome back.
Sure.
So we went through and looked at conditions on the ground, looked at housing density, things like that. So the majority of changes involve the NR zones. Estate residential is reserved for the lakefront, 3 Mile Drive, the largest parcel along 3 Mile Drive there. NR1, it takes up a larger part of the city than its predecessor. NR2, and we have questions about that in particular. Whether certain areas belong in NR2 or not, and NR3, of course, Cabbage Patch and some of the denser areas sort of in the northwest corner of the city. The Civic and Parks districts we have for City Hall, for parks and for schools throughout town. And the transition district you'll see sort of behind the commercial corridors, between the commercial corridors and the residential areas.
Michael, Mara, if I could, maybe if we could use a specific stereo to kind of help the think it through, and that would be Trombley. We know Trombley Elementary School, we know from our community how important it is to preserve and protect that as a public facing asset. And as we've discussed what the future of that is with our community, we've stated to them that we have these types of tools in place to protect that as such an asset. So with Civic and Parks District zoning, could you just clarify for us, like how that site would be run through this, and are we thereby protecting that asset in a manner that I think would be amenable to the community? That makes sense to everybody? We're still trying to accomplish here.
See where you're going to.
Because we don't want to be too specific either, but we want to make sure that Trombley stays this public facing asset. And we've shared with the community that this is our way of doing that with an asset we don't own. So all we can do is control it with tools, right? So are we adequately doing that with this tool?
I know we've talked a little bit about it at the office, but.
I can help out here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thanks for guiding us to an example. If we look at, I'm sorry to keep switching from the memo to the packet, but page 17 of the packet, and thanks for having page numbers on the whole packet. That is something we have to learn how to do. You can look at the different uses that are allowed in the civic center. And I find by taking an exploration of what uses are allowed in each district is the easiest way to understand the definition. Is it page 8 or is it?
It's
Page 17.
there's the automatic page numbers at the bottom where it says page blank of blank.
Yeah.
That's kind of hard to read for me. So there's the page number above that though, which is in the original document, that's page 8.
Yeah, we did good at having page numbers on everything, but then we also
Yeah.
have 2 page numbers on something, so it's maybe.
Yeah.
So we start to go to map and then.
So we're looking at section 2.7 of the ordinance that says table of land uses.
Okay, so when we think about the future of Trombley Elementary, we see the types of uses that are allowed on that parcel of land if it were ever to change hands. So permitted uses are a solar energy system or voting place. Then we continue along our civic category to allow for municipal building, a public utility building, indoor outdoor recreation, a school, both elementary and high school, and then special land use for a wireless communication facility. And then go into cultural institutions, permitted use, special land use for a theater or entertainment venue. So those are all the potential opportunities for the site. Does that help guide the question or the thought process?
Yes.
Do you think we're adequately protecting strongly with this?
Right?
Okay.
Jimmy, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry.
No.
I mean, my initial thoughts are is, I mean, first of all, we don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, when I first saw the map, I was surprised that it wasn't, green for civic, because that's what it is now.
It is great.
Oh, it is, okay, yeah, it wasn't, okay, I was looking at the rest of the neighborhood around it.
No.
So, yeah, I didn't know it was that small, I
And
apologize.
I do want to state it is currently zoned RA, one family residential. So if the zoning doesn't change, and the school no longer is owning it, the only thing it could be used for would be single family residential land.
Right, so that's sort of.
That's what we're with now.
Yeah.
The question is,
This.
we kind of thought putting it in all the schools, all the churches, all the municipal buildings in, actually, I don't know if all the churches are in, civic or not.
I believe they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, and this is actually was in the master plan, is to create a civic and parks district.
So-
These types of things.
I think that's where I was tracking with the comment is it fair to say RA is kind of equivalent to maybe not ER, but NR1 in the new zoning?
I think
So what we'd be doing is we're calling it out right now as something which is different from the surrounding neighborhood and different from what it is now. I'm not sure that protects in any particular way. I mean, I was a little surprised to see that. So that was my initial impression when I saw that on the map.
That it is civic, you're saying that?
Well, not so much just a civic, because I was corrected that the green box is civic. But those other 4 blocks by 2 blocks sort of deal where it shaded the dark orange.
Oh, yeah, right.
That is changing the zoning that it's currently at.
So I agree, that's my biggest thing when digging here is NR2. I think that's the biggest change that's proposed on this. But before we jump into that, on Trombley in particular, this would give the power for whatever the future use is to the community. Where we're voting on it, where, the council is hopefully, I mean, everyone wants it to open up as a school again, so it's just hopefully that happens. But if it doesn't, at least this zoning, if I have it correct, would give planning commission, city council the power to help determine whatever would be proposed.
Right.
If it's an alternate use.
The somewhat restrictive nature, right, of
Yeah.
civic in this case actually does put the determination of the future of the site,
It would have to be rezoned.
right?
Whereas now, we don't put it into civic and make this new category of this,
Well, that's
if somebody bought the school, tore it down and put up estate style homes, that's permitted, that's
Right.
allowed. Like,
Well,
it doesn't go to planning, it doesn't go to council.
Well, as it sits, not to go too hypothetical, but as it sits right now, you could only build one house on all of Trumbull, it's one tax lot.
Yeah, you could do lot splits.
Yeah, but then you'd have to get that.
Yeah, you'd have to get that approved
You'd have to
too,
get that approved.
but theoretically, that's possible.
Yeah.
So bottom line, this bolsters and strengthens our ability
Yeah.
to
But
influence what happens there and holds the district in this case accountable.
Yeah.
To what the community wants.
Yeah. Yes.
And knowing we don't own it, this is where we need to be strong.
Yeah.
So, and we're all good that this is as strong as we can be on this.
Are you speaking only of the Trombley lot?
Well, I see what you're saying, because if it bleeds over into the adjacent,
Bleeds into your parks then too, it's same, we have the same zoning then for a 3 mile point. Right, same with St. Ambrose,
I think what you're saying, should that
Yeah.
expanded greens, or expanded purple space, or no, green space.
Well,
Right.
I guess maybe I was getting ahead of myself. We can keep the green spot green in anticipation of whatever happens with it. But I guess I was wondering why those other blocks were turned to orange as part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
was that a separate discussion that we should talk about later, or?
I think we should get to that next.
Are you talking about the immediately adjacent, I guess, to like the east and west?
Yeah.
Well, if you look at all of Barrington, Pemberton, Lake Point, the west side of Westchester. Harcourt, which is already there, but then
NR2,
which we could have two-family residential.
with the exception of Beaconsfield and Nottingham.
So what's the rationale behind this? What's the thought behind changing the zoning on those blocks from a single family right now to allow multifamily?
Probably Harcourt and Bedford there.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it's a lot.
Barrington, Pemberton, Lake Point, Westchester. Okay. The lot sizes, number one, we tried to sort of group them in a way that, and in the zoning ordinances as well. In the ordinance, we will also have a table of, minimum lot sizes per zoning district. So this pretty well correlates with, with that, which I don't think we've presented to you yet.
It's in the master plan.
So is the thought to try to, well, I mean, and then just so then everyone sees north of Jefferson, then it's also all of, it's everything from Harvard, all the way through Audubon could be two-family residential. So I mean, is a thought here to try to create just more density?
To allow for, more for accessory units, for more sort of single housing. But also, those three streets, probably Harcourt and Bedford, there are several duplexes on them already.
Not on Bedford, but on Trombley, so it's just Harcourt,
Okay.
and then the east side of Trombley, that's it. So I think I don't see anyone in the community being good with rezoning these single family streets to allow multifamily. And I think for a couple, I think one, we have one of our duties is to maintain and increase property values, right? So the average price for a 2-unit right now in Grosse Pointe is right around $350,000. The average price for a single family home is $521,000. So I think that right there just tells us that going from a street that's R1 to RA right now to allow multifamily, I don't think that's something that is advisable. Where if you actually on some of these streets that are already zoned multifamily for specifically looking at like Maryland and Beaconsfield and whatnot, you already have multifamily housing there. Increasing density there could actually add value to those streets because the folks that live on those blocks, live on the streets, they're already buying in the neighborhood and they know that there's multifamily housing around. So it's not, you didn't buy your single family home and then next door is going to be converted to a 2-unit and then that drastically changed, So that's my thought is I think pretty much all of the new NR2 should be changed to NR1. But I do, then I comment on NR3, but that's my thought is everything that's the new streets that are NR2 should be.
Yeah, we do seem to, it's a good point, right? We've essentially expanded the amount of two-family by a lot, right?
Yeah.
Right, in most of the.
Like I was looking at this first, I'm like, maybe this could.
It's good that you brought this up because I think I was actually misinterpreting the legend a little bit and just basically seeing, Yeah.
No, I was first looking at this, I'm like, well, if we really increase the amount of folks that are south of Jefferson, maybe that could be a way to open up Trombley again. But I'm looking at who generally is leasing or buying south of Jefferson for Harcourt and whatnot. Very few families. There are some, but it's mostly people downsizing. There's a lot of people downsizing that are on the streets. So I don't think that was the one thing I looked at, or like, oh, maybe that could be there, but I don't think.
We sort of anticipated this and talking to Warren and in the office, sort of came up with a couple solutions. One being making duplexes a special land use, not by right in NR2. And if we down zone this, maybe just those couple of blocks in Harcourt. If we kept them NR2, that makes the duplexes that exist conforming where they're not conforming otherwise.
Right.
I have a question. When you say that households are downsizing, are they downsizing to seek a duplex townhome?
Single story living, or they're selling their forever home that they raise their kids in,
Mhm.
and kids are off and whatnot, and they're downsized to an apartment. So they live on a floor and rent out the other one, or they go and rent one. Most of our two families are up and down apartment style.
A stacked duplex?
Yeah, we have some townhouses, but they're mostly stacked duplex.
Okay.
So
Do you
yeah.
think that we want to contribute to adding more opportunities for people to downsize in Grosse Pointe Park?
I think where we do that is along our commercial corridors. So I think we do that in our central business district, and our CMU corridor mixed use. And maybe even that, I think that's where we can add some more density there, through mixed use development.
So you're saying apartments with.
Apartments above with
residential-
retail.
Retail.
That's in the land use table now for both those districts.
Yeah, right. So like we look at right now, we have, and this is across all 5 points. One of the best condo buildings is on the corner of Jefferson and Lake Point, Point Park condo development. That is there's such a high demand for that kind of product. And like those things don't hit the market. They all sell off market. So there's such little supply of that kind of product. And I think that's what we can fill in on Kirchhoff, on Jefferson, on Mac, and on a smaller scale on Charlotte.
Where, like, just in the business areas of those streets though, or like anything on those street frontage, like all through town? Because there's not a lot of real estate in the commercial areas for even,
Yeah, right.
for like a building a fifth the size of that one.
Would you be talking about adjusting the structure from that Lake Point Jefferson to a retail first floor?
What I mean by that is not necessarily the size of Point Park. Yeah, we don't have the real estate for that. Well, the only place we could do it is like the lawn in front of the library. But that style condo. That style condo. So even if it's a smaller mixed use building with like 10 units above retail on the ground floor on Kirchhoff, I think that's how we can fill that demand that's there. For help fill that demand.
I don't know the city as much as you, but I do know that cities are moving towards the direction of allowing for more housing opportunities within the residential districts because they hear that there is demand. I'm hearing at Point Park, and also the families that you mentioned that were downsizing. Well, they still need to have a housing stock to invest in. And if we limit opportunities for people to develop residential homes, because if we just limit residential development or new density, like the townhomes that people are seeking, to neighborhood mixed-use commercial corridors, then that's not giving a lot of opportunity to contribute to adding to our housing supply. I just want you guys to be part of this conversation of what cities are doing, but you definitely know the city more than I do.
I guess, okay, think about Whittier, the road, right? I mean, do we think the future of Grosse Pointe Park involves the density of Whittier roads increasing? It's, just from my perspective, just really hard to imagine that, right? Because yes, we could, theoretically, right, it would increase the housing stock, but what would it do to the quality of that, right? Look at all that, with the mature housing stock that we have throughout the Grosse Pointe Park. I just don't know if it's really like.
I don't think we're there as a community now. Or I don't know if that's will ever be our community.
Right.
Yeah. I just don't see that. To the point, I don't see the need is to the point that we should drastically change the landscape of a lot of these single-family homes that are traditionally single-family home blocks. I think that we have all of Harcourt, we have half of Trombley, and then we have all of the West Park, Cabbage Patch district of multifamily housing. If we're already per this zoning code here for NR3, I think this is a big change. Right now, our Cabbage Patch area, you can only have 2-family residential. this is increasing that up to 6, which I think is that's a great idea. Because that area, you already have multifamily housing. There, I think in those zoning districts, that actually can improve the value of those properties, where if you have a 2-unit property and you can add a 3rd unit, you're gonna drastically increase the value of that property, and that sales content helps your neighbor too. Where if you have, if you say the same scenario on one of these other blocks, it's a single family home, that actually goes in the opposite direction.
And I just think it's just really hard to imagine a scenario, right, where Berkshire is, increasing its density, even on,
Yeah, right.
one singular building, right?
I don't see,
I don't
if we go poll our neighbors,
Right.
I don't see anyone. I think the folks that would support this would be a very short list, if any.
Right, and honestly, it would be certainly people that are not currently constituents, right?
Yeah, right, if you're not,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
right.
gonna develop.
But if you ask the homeowners on those blocks.
Right, exactly, which is who I think we wanna keep in mind for sure.
I think we can definitely, I can circle up with Mara and Michael, and we'll tweak this. We may have to create another zoning district just for that street and a half. So that's kind of what we're trying to, or just maybe take a better look at the dimensional standards, which we're not really gonna get into, because Terry, Brendan, and I are still kind of fine tuning some of those dimensional ones, but I think that's more of why we were trying to kind of fit a Trombley hardcore block, and kind of extrapolate it around the city just from a,
Yeah. Well, I
dimensional
think,
standards.
I think
Yes.
NR2 still makes sense. I think NR2 makes sense on the street on Nottingham, Somerset, Harcourt, and then half of Trump is the way that it's set up right now. I still think NR2 makes sense there. And then I think NR3 is where our current multifamily housing is in the Cabbage Patch area, where our most density is. And where there's definitely room on certain lots to add further density.
And you're also saying the business district.
Yeah, and the business district, that's where I think we can add, where that's a value add to everybody, right? But as long as, those properties, because the way that this has been worded, the properties that in the NR3 districts that you're adding density to, they're gonna check all the boxes for the lot size, for unit size and whatnot, that'll, keep,
And it's gonna either maintain or increase property values.
I would increase. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think the character of our neighborhood too, right? When I look at this, I feel like, to your point, right, the NR1 is kind of underutilized on this map in a lot of ways. I do agree that there are absolute places where NR2 and NR3 have, upside for the city. But I just think also about the character of these neighborhoods, right? Like, if we mentioned some of these beautiful historic homes, right, that would be it would be devastated, right? Or like probably architecturally and aesthetically to be turned into a 2-family.
Well, I have a 4-unit on Maryland that was a 2-unit. And at some point a long time ago, it got converted to a 4, and the layout is not good. It's like, you can always tell when a property's being converted. And it's, so those, if you're taking single family, it's the same thing. I've seen single families that get turned into a 2. I've seen 2 units that get turned into a single family, and the layouts are always, not quite conducive to, I think, what the community really wants and the market wants. So,
Because I think a lot of these NR2 neighborhoods, if you drove down and try to envision any of those homes as being multifamily, you basically assume that they're going to be raised. And I don't think we want to set that in motion. Right. It's not even not saying that, right, by changing the zoning, it's guaranteeing that, but I just don't think there's a pressure to do so, and why would we be,
So we're increasing our capacity to meet the growing need of our seniors who wanna age in the community while not harming the character of other areas of the community.
right, yeah, right.
Is the goal.
Well, I think the way the NR3 district and the central business district, CMU, NMU, I think that all helps our aging community that wants to downsize. But then also, we have a great young, vibrant community as well. That's increased a lot over the last number of years. And adding additional density there is just gonna help all the businesses that are opening and want to keep attracting. You know, we want to make approachable Charlevoix and Mac, we want to make that a more than a 2 to 3 day a week business district, and more density and more people that are living over there is how you do that. So I think that all those changes for NR3, CBD, CMU, NMU moves that all in the right direction. And then the transitional district as well, like that all moves that in the right direction.
And you mentioned ADUs, but I just want to confirm, so ADUs are permitted in this under essentially any residential.
That's how I got so far, yes.
I wasn't sure if that was maybe like a distinction between like the ER, like the NR1 versus 2, but it's not, right? It's permitted use regardless.
Strictly accessory.
I think we can move on.
Okay,
Okay, would you like to take a look at the land use table itself? As we started talking about ADUs. So again, on document page 8 here, which I think is PDF page 17.
Yeah.
Yes. Section 2.7, table of land use.
The table of land uses, Mara spoke a little bit about accessory unit uses. So under dwelling units, and you can see what we've got allowed in each of these accessories and any of them. Single family in all, single family manufactured as you kind of go up in density, you know, the zoning districts where they're allowed kind of collapse. We did have duplex and multifamily multifamily dwelling, low density up to 4 units as by right. And by the way, the P in the sort of blue there is permitted by right and has, of course, a special land use. So we have those as P and change those to special land use. On Warren's recommendation, after some conversations that sort of we were anticipating this kind of discussion we just had.
We'll fine tune it again.
No, I think the idea of, you know, including duplexes as a special land use, right, for some of these zones does make sense, right? I mean, right, you have it for NR2.
Right, they would be by right in NR3 and special in NR2 on, you know, some of these streets where they may fit.
Right. It just creates a little bit more protection, right, to make sure there's someone else input, right?
And then you go to the next page and we've got group homes, of course, which are also residential. By state law, some of those are by right. We had originally had categories for above 12 adults or children and took those out. So didn't know, that was a discussion that we wanted to have with you if you wanted to allow anything larger than that. Senior housing, assisted living by right in NR2 and NR3. And CMU, the commercial mixed use, and then senior living independent in NR3 and CMU. Move on to, any questions on any of those? Okay.
Yes, just to be clear to what this means, if somebody in any of the residential zoning districts wants to open up a daycare for no more than 6 children, that would be allowed. And there would be no, it's permitted use, there would be no planning commission oversight. It would be simply allowed.
Sex is right.
well, childcare center is within the commercial uses.
I was talking about the
Childcare home.
here, yeah.
childcare home,
Okay,
home or family, the road right, we have that one right
One
there.
to 6 children.
Yeah, 1 to 6 children, like
Yeah.
that is permitted in any house in Westwood Park.
Is that the case right now?
It's completely silent on
Right,
any of those types of uses.
right. How do we feel about that?
That is governed by state law, actually. If it's a-
And depending on the classification, some of them are, some of them.
Yeah,
So you can, as of right, run a home care, no matter what the zoning is, 1 to 6 kids. Okay. Let's hear that.
And
Same with adult foster care.
Yes.
yes.
But for anything above that, you can make it a special land use, which we've done only in NR3.
And same with foster care, assuming foster care, same thing, state.
Yes.
Okay, public, quasi-public, and some of these we took right from the existing ordinance. The recreation and outdoor is permitted with special requirements in any of the residential zones. Surface parking lots, parking structures in the CBD or commercial mixed-use corridor along Mac and in the transition zone, of course. Public municipal buildings are allowed in pretty much every district. Religious institutions, we talked a little bit, and this is a question for you about sort of major and minor, depending on the sort of size, the amount of people. If you want to make that distinction, number one, and you know, where you want to put it, based on that. You want to get into that?
I think you were on the right track with the question.
Okay, so,
The question is, do you want to differentiate between a minor religious institution, so it has a smaller building footprint, than a major religious institution, which.
Based on square, talking about land area?
Yes,
yeah, size of congregation, if it's a sort of, you know, storefront church,
Sure.
do we allow that in where kind of thing? Elementary, middle, and high schools are allowed by right with special requirements in any zone currently in your current current zoning ordinance, so we just kind of copied that over. You get higher than that, colleges, universities, trade schools, things like that, and then they're restricted to commercial zones, college and university, of course, on the commercial streets, mixed-use streets, or trade locations, like right on those streets. Questions on those?
I guess maybe if I could comment on the religious institution question. I can envision scenarios where there could be religious institutions, whether they're big or not big. It could be controversial to some people, so I don't know how people feel about just making it a special land use all the way across, just like it is.
Well, because there's also tax-based questions as well, right? Religious institutions are not taxable. So like, we want to have that authority so we know how much of our tax base is being lost, if for no other reason, right? So you
Right.
can manage that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And I mean, the way I read this, blue T right now is if someone came with a project and they were in NMU CBD, they would not have to go through planning commission approval. They could just do it.
It's a permit, right, permitted use, yeah.
Unlike the residential where it's the S.
Yeah,
Which quite frankly, I mean, is that for consistency purposes, should anything that's not non-taxable have to go through? Because healthcare institutions, right, and schools, aren't they all non-taxable? And therefore, I mean, theoretically, our whole business district could become non-taxable and not driving tax base, right?
Theoretically, market realities, likely no.
No, but I mean,
Um,
do we need to manage that?
It's not something I'm really concerned about. I would be supportive of special land use across the board for religious institutions because of the high traffic nature that those could be, you know, to kind of circle back to Mike's comment. I view it more of as a land use thing versus a tax base thing.
You're talking about moving into special land
Yeah,
use, just to
across the
create some
board.
scrutiny of planning
Yeah.
over the execution, which I
Yeah.
think is probably fair, right?
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of uses that run the whole table of where they could be. Like churches, I think, are really, just because churches are usually the oldest buildings in the community, we normally put all over residential.
Well, yeah, but there is a church that is now on First.
Well-
So,
Yeah, well, yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's, but they don't
religious
own it,
institutes.
right? I mean, that's still privately owned, right? Like they're paying rent to, well, so it's not
Yeah.
considered non-taxable.
Yeah, I think that's why I don't really like going down the tax books, if it's owned by a tax exempt entity, if it's being leased by a
But they're a
tax.
tenant.
Yeah, I
Is
think it's a
that-
tenant, there's a lot of different nuances there. The code is massive, and that's why we have the city assessor, which I am not.
So is that landlord?
It does not look.
Yes, that's what this is addressing.
Right.
Is there a reason that two of the school categories were not included under civic, even under primary or special land use? I just thought that was odd, because I would have thought that.
Oh, college and trade vocational.
Just understanding, right, our particular, civic site, right?
If I remember correctly, those are not allowed in your current ordinance. Is that correct?
They're not. They're not allowed.
Right, like trade schools and colleges, you mean?
Yeah.
So if I may, the two uses have different hours of operation, but we might be able to, like, if I can see the logic for adding them in the civic district. But typically a university trade school will have night classes, and these civic centers are adjacent to residential communities. So it's just to regulate the pedestrian or noise, traffic, any potential nuisance in the community. But we can consider adding them as special land uses or,
Yeah,
I think that's appropriate, yeah.
okay, thank you.
So did I hear we want to make religious institutions special in every category or in the commercial categories as well?
I would be comfortable with that. Well, currently, our religious institutions are being shown as civic on the map here.
Right, so that's in the instance, right, that you,
So I mean, the two should just match, right?
oh, right, you're saying that it's
So
not
it's-
permitted under,
It's not permitted, but then St. Ambrose and what's the church on Maryland?
And
Yeah,
So
so those
we
should
should include that.
include it for
Permitted?
civic.
for civic, yeah.
Permitted in civic.
Well, and then that would permit the church at Trombley then too. So, so I think special.
So there's such thing as a non-conforming use, and we don't want to write more non-conforming uses, but we do have another article coming up in October for you guys to review. It's the non-conformity section, and there's opportunities for businesses to apply for a Class A non-conformity. So all non-conformities within the city are Class B, but Class A allows a business to expand, enlarge, change their use, continue operating. So we would have an area for these churches to continue operating. They have the rights to continue operating.
Well, I guess
And
if,
expand.
let's say St. Ambrose were to stop operating, a new church would not be able to open up there.
If they were not in operation for 1 year,
Then a new church would have to go.
yeah, but 3 months, 6 months, then they would continue, a new church would be able to
Do you
come in.
think special land use in that event is sort of like the right balance, compromise between the two? Special land use and the civic? Because what you're talking about is basically like pre-existing non-conforming, right? For like anything that's not conforming, right, but predates the adoption of the new.
Correct.
Yes. It just depends if you would like to see a religious institution at the civic parcels.
Right.
You're still allowed to operate.
Yeah.
Just what do you want the future of the uses to be?
That's true. It does create an interesting church and state discussion.
Here for it.
Walk right into it, that event. Maybe we do.
So then I guess kind of as it is right now, then makes sense. That will work.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it does, yeah.
With respect to the existing
Civic.
Civic.
Yeah.
And, but then the other three boxes, the NMU, CBD, CMU, which would presumably be new projects coming.
Right.
We should not make those P, in my mind. We should make those S.
This does make sense if we're considering if we considered like the regular hours of, say, like a trade vocational school, right, versus well, I guess is a regular, right, like demand and impact on the community, right, that it.
Yeah, nice
Yes.
parallel.
Is a religious institute though, is if the concern is just tax basis. You can have a tax exempt church operates, doesn't, we're just saying any religious institute needs to get special. I mean, if it's a religious institute that's gonna pay rent and not be tax exempt, I mean, let them rent.
I mean, my view is like any religious institution where that's their main function, should probably go through an approval process beyond the administrative, the city officials saying, yes, you're automatically approved.
For a tax exempt status or just like any, I mean, 'cause you can,
In my
religion.
opinion, it's any religious, just the nature of it, it's not a retail, it's, it could be controversial in some quarters.
So special is probably the right,
I believe special would be the right one, but I'm
it
just.
just creates some level
Yeah.
of, yeah, no, I think I would agree with that.
Does it come out of civic or in special civic as well?
I could leave without permitted in civic and then just special. I mean, I don't know, does everyone feel that way?
I think
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Yeah.
And if you want to remove any special land uses, you can. We don't have to allow these uses everywhere. It's your discretion. It's how you want to build your community based off of community feedback, master plan.
Okay, so commercial uses, we got a whole bunch of those. One by one, if you like. Most of them are pretty reserved for the mixed use areas. Mara brought up a good point regarding.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Commercial uses. Oh, the first column? Sorry, kind of got,
So we're permitting bed and breakfasts in ER in the estate residential.
That's why we have a training, and we went round and round about, where that most makes sense.
Yeah.
It was a question, it was a talking point I wanted to put before here.
Yeah.
We get questions on, I've got a large estate home, can I do a bed and breakfast? And it doesn't really say yes or no in our current ordinance, so now's our time to take a stance, one way or the other. I didn't get the question, like,
I see I see a lot of headaches for you in your future if we. I care about you.
I thank you for the care.
I don't think that's,
It's like, do we want to have them at all in town? And that's kind of a yes, no.
It's not something I've ever thought of.
we have Airbnbs are.
And that'll be a special meeting to be discussed later when we do this, the whole short-term rental.
Like Airbnb and certain, well, I don't think we can regulate Airbnbs. We can,
Oh, yeah.
even with the recent,
Nothing's passed.
Okay, so
Nothing
it's
has
still in
made it
front of
through. But they've been trying for 5-6 years since I've been a city manager.
Yeah.
So for now, we can make regulations.
It's introduced at the state level every year and.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of city managers who are very good at
right,
getting.
that's gonna
community
be
involved
a big, that's gonna be, and all 5 points, it's very great. There's some Airbnbs there are.
Yeah, and I think the only one who's officially allowed them in some areas is West Point City.
Yeah.
Based on current research. But again, that's coming a special meeting of this body in October to be scheduled within the next hour.
Yeah, well, I think, to not go there now, I think, stay residential for bed and breakfast, I don't think that makes sense to have that
Just take it off the table entirely?
I think so.
Add something, the bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs on the other hand are a tool for attracting more people into your city. So they could be seen as placemaking opportunities to enhance your economic vitality and add more shoppers.
To what degree, I don't know, but it's
Well, here's my, so I'm National Association of Realtors is very pro Airbnb everywhere. I'm very anti Airbnb everywhere. And then my thought is if you're running an Airbnb, for example, VRBO, I believe that changes the use of the property. It's no longer residential, which to me means that is someone's primary residence, or that is a place that, you know, there's not people coming and going. So if I have my house and my neighbor then opens up an Airbnb and I got a bunch of folks coming and going that, you know, I think it's one of the great things about our community is you know your neighbors. And I think that would drastically change the landscape of that. So I do agree that bed and breakfast, something along those lines, is a great way to get people to the community. But I think we need to think of a different way to do it.
Yeah.
Or a different location to do it. Maybe we can do it somewhere else, you know, but I don't think estate residential, because if you look, the location of the estate residential properties is not in a commercial area. You know, it's not like it's right next door to where our restaurants are, and things along those lines. We're talking waterfront homes, we're talking 3 miles in Bishop.
you're saying that wouldn't effectively increase.
I don't think it's gonna
It
come.
makes sense.
If the goal of a bed and breakfast is to bring more people to our community that aren't familiar with it, I don't think that's the best way to do it.
Right, I don't think people spending a weekend in a property on, right next to Willow Park, Windmill Point Park, right, is
Yeah,
really,
right.
I don't think it's that likely to occur. And when we look at the way it makes sense from this, like, to have it as permitted for estate residential, because those are the homes that are the size to actually, but it also kind of flies in the face to your point, because it does make them more of a commercial operation.
Right.
Which is very much at odds with the idea of state residential.
You gotten like one question about this, Warren, or multiple questions?
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to know is how.
Yeah, I know, I've gotten one, there may have been more. Lydia, is there more than just the one, or is it just the one for now on this one? Just the one okay, just one for now, but it's like, well, we're going through this table, we may as well.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
But
at
there's
the
that-
council level, as we've discussed SRTs, we've talked about the importance of engaging the community and getting feedback. So I'm assuming that's gonna be an output, future discussions, right? Is, we say this is a companion to that, because they are a similar aesthetic, right, or similar. Maybe we get some input from the community to just really test the thinking and facilitate that conversation.
Yeah, I would be curious to see what, like, public feedback.
Yeah.
is.
Is there anyone on the council or planning commission here that thinks that a bed and breakfast at a, you know, state residential is, they see the benefit of that, they see that could be good for the community?
I haven't thought a single hotel right.
I think about it,
When I saw this on the table. I don't see it being overwhelmingly popular, but I don't know, it's never anything I've considered.
I don't see it being that popular. I guess I also don't see, given the usage or the application of state residential district, honestly, this being really impactful. Like, I would be, you know, I guess my point, I'd be kind of surprised, right, if
I think taking the community's opinion or pulse on short-term rentals was a very good proxy for their thoughts on bed and breakfasts. The two,
Right.
Yeah.
one could argue are.
it's really just a
very similar.
definition,
Yeah.
right? How
And that, because we'd have to write a definition for.
can you
what
truly
makes
distinguish a
breakfast
bed and
bed and
breakfast versus a short term?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, so I think
Bed
we're-
and breakfast would be owner occupied.
So there already is a.
That's the major distinction.
Owner occupied under what, turn it up consistently, like all year round, right? Because lots of Airbnbs are owner occupied, short-term rentals are owner occupied.
Owner lives in
Yeah.
structure.
Right.
Right, but I could live in my structure and then I could still, say like, all right, I'm leaving for a month and leaving for a week and I'm gonna, put it on Airbnb, right? Like, and also to your point, like, how do we, then you gotta enforce, right?
Yes. And that's what I was
My previous employer where we had an individual who
document whenever the owner who said he was living in the house was actually there and send me a weekly email on all the comings and.
Right.
So,
This,
Yeah.
this is the potential to, So should we table the bed and breakfast discussion
Yeah, I
for
think,
our
I
special
think we
meeting?
can fold that
Yeah,
into the
let's do
short
that.
term.
fold that into it, yeah.
Well, you can skip the next one on the table too, it's short-term rentals.
Okay. If we can go up one, to bar, Mara brought up a good point, the difference between bar and nightclub. Want to distinguish the two, we don't have nightclub on here, and I consider any difference in location.
I don't think we need to.
Nightclubs tending to be, noisier with loud music, that kind of thing, or live music.
Larger footprint.
There aren't too many properties that would be big enough
Right.
for a nightclub in the way most people perceive it.
That's what I'm always the demand for it.
Yeah.
We're all, we're all, we're all better
Protective
places.
guys.
Same bar.
Yeah.
Okay, wanted to just bring it to your attention. Before they go to the bar, perhaps people will be going to a tattoo shop.
Yeah.
And we have that in all the categories. Catering facilities, commercial kitchens, just in the CMU, and we think that makes sense. If you're delivery trucks, if you're making food and then taking it somewhere in bulk, it makes sense to be in sort of a more auto-oriented kind of corridor.
Do you guys want to look at this chart and see if there's any, or if we could go use by use, or do you want to see if there's any that are, call out at you that you don't agree with,
I guess
you want to talk about?
when I first saw this, if you go about 2/3 of the way down,
Okay, thank you.
retail sale establishment seems to me to be so broad that someone could kind of make everything that and kind of shoehorn it into that category. So in your world, does retail sale establishment like have some connotation of something more specific than just any retail store? You know what I'm saying?
Sort
Do
of.
we have the glossary with us?
We don't. No.
I do have a.
Yeah.
Also surprised to see that one in the, transitional district as a permitted use.
Retail.
Right, and honestly, cafe, I wouldn't necessarily say that it would surprise me if it was special land use, it does a little bit surprise me if it's, primary.
Yeah.
You want your over house to be a coffee shop?
I couldn't imagine if my neighbors would feel the same way. I don't think
Yeah,
that,
that's actually.
I don't think there's a problem having it as a special case because it's transitional, right? Especially as,
Yeah.
the neighborhood characters potentially change. I just don't know if I agree with it as by right.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of encroaching
I
our
like that.
commercial district into the residential.
Restaurant cafe in the very last column, transitional,
Well, but
change that to
on
that.
this, so conversely though, this is only in the transitional district, right? So
it's about 2 blocks back.
right, but two block, I'm just saying, I don't think if there's any problem thinking it's special use, I just don't know that it's, right? Because, the transitional, right, I mean, it is like a parking.
I'm switching my mind, I think it should be P again. Yeah. Because this is the parking management district. And if you have a special threshold for keeping a building exactly how it is and just going in and out for a coffee, which is making it a parking lot, why should the parking lot have a lesser burden? And that's the whole point of doing the transitional district, is to kind of help us manage and identify this is where this can go in the future. So I don't get a vote, but I'm changing my mind back to how it currently is.
That goes for restaurant and retail?
Makes sense, Warren.
Yeah, in the transitional district.
Well, so I guess I had a different concern about retail sales establishment, separate from the restaurant. It's just when I first read it, it seemed the broadness of the category. It's like a catch-all, and someone who is, can classify their establishment not in any of these other ones, like, for example, CBD, could just say, oh, I'm permitted via the retail sale establishment. I'm just observing, I'm not saying that's good one way or the other, I'm just saying it just seems very broad, and it would tend to basically if someone could get anything. That category.
Well, we could differentiate between the more nuisance categories if we'd like. So we could add smoke shop and perhaps add liquor, or we have liquor store. We could think about more distinct categories, but I have a potential definition. It's still broad. If this helps, a retail sales establishment is an establishment engaged in the selling of goods and merchandise to the public for personal or household consumption and rendering services incidental to the sale of such goods. Broad.
I mean, I guess is the concern, alcohol, tobacco, things along those, marijuana, things like that.
It could be that could be an example.
So could it say retail sales, and then we could not including
Cannabis.
Or
cannabis, alcohol, tobacco,
Change the definition.
I don't know, is that? I get what you're saying, so do we need to come up with a separate categories, or can we just have retail sales and then have some exclusions that clearly show it's not permitted in?
we could do that, or we could just take retail sale establishment off the table. Or take it off the
Or
list,
transitional.
or just take it off the list. So basically what that would mean is if your establishment does not fall into any of these other categories, then it would basically be an S. So you got to find, which one of these applies to your place and go by the direction of that category. And if you're one of those rare establishments that doesn't fall into any of these categories, then by default, you would be an S.
Seems we'd have to enumerate a whole lot more categories
Yeah.
than if we put an exclusion list. That would be more succinct and shorter.
Yeah, I guess I was suggesting not to enumerate it. It would be understood if you're not enumerated that you would have to go under special review.
I think what you're saying, like if you wanted to do a jewelry store, that's not,
Jewelry, clothing, books.
right, that you,
Computers, I mean, they're just like.
Anything.
Yeah. like, I don't see that in
Right,
this
yeah.
list.
So it'd be too hard to subcategorize that thing, so I think exclusionary
Exclusionary line
is
is the
the way.
one probably that's gonna be
Okay.
necessary.
So I think what we don't want in those categories, for, anywhere is gonna be any,
Did you say uses regulated by the government?
yeah, maybe that's any use regulated by the government, which also brings me to my point is we gotta have some liquor store somewhere. It's not-
I was gonna say the.
We don't need the jewelry store.
Yeah, so basically what additionally does a liquor store have to also sell in order for it to not qualify as a liquor store, and that's what will occur, right? I mean,
Yeah,
So, all right, so if we put, we have, any government regulated substances, it does not fall into retail.
okay.
Sounds good. What about liquor store?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of.
And do you want to change it to convenience / liquor store?
Michigan, it's party store.
Yeah.
I actually like that, party store.
I think,
I think of like our best example of a, a liquor, it's a convenience store, but Park Place is like a,
Park Place and Village Wine are
like beloved. They're like,
they're two
Yeah.
wonderful establishments.
And what do you call, so what do you get, where do they fit in here?
right.
I would say.
Because the way when I looked through this, I was just like, well,
well, you know what, because if one of those stores closes and someone else wants to open up again, it's not zoned, they'd have to come in front of the, for a special use, right? And we probably don't want a bunch of liquor stores opening up, right?
so yeah, special. Would you think?
Or maybe, what if it's just maybe it does make sense to leave it as it is. Probably why you guys did that.
This is less blank for our conversation. We do have to put something in here.
Yeah.
And also, maybe we want to rethink how we name this. Maybe we want to say beer and wine store and allow those as opposed to liquor. Or differentiate between beer and wine and liquor. Because beer and wine.
The ones you mentioned sell liquor as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Canada does that. I think it's very inconvenient.
Right,
You go somewhere, get your beer versus.
Oh, I grew up in New York and it was the same way and it was very annoying. Much better here.
Please don't do that.
Sound like I have a drinking problem.
Maybe you should increase the barrels. You should all be,
I mean, do we want to maintain it as a special use, just to, so that there is some sort of
Public
community
hearing,
community input, but I mean, to not allow, right, because the two that we are, I was out somewhere recently and I overheard someone having a long conversation about, I was at the pool and they were talking about how much they love Village Wine Shop. It's
Well,
like,
I just had an idea too, if you want to keep it permitted and make it easier for businesses like this to enter, because they probably sell food too at these places. Yeah, okay, and that's essential for a community to have these neighborhood shops. You could add separation buffers, so a party store can't be within another 1,000 feet from another party store.
But you're saying that, because that's the little voice in my head is right now, like liquor store has a connotation to it that I think this community has not wanted in the past. And we've actually been pretty outward in our efforts to prevent that, even buying property, right? So, but the other institutions we've talked about fit a different definition, right? So,
what's the future of Fairfax?
yeah.
Well, I
So
think,
maybe it is more community input to really help us frame what the actual definition is so that we're preserving and protecting the corridors that we want in this sort of.
well, the good news is we only have about 3 blocks regulated. With the on Jefferson, Convertible, Charlevoix and back, right? So it's like,
If we did a density thing, we could probably.
there's a within a certain amount.
Right, that would basically pretty much imply that you're only gonna have one on each.
Mhm.
On each of the 3 commercial, right, unless, maybe multiple on Mac.
Yeah.
But on each end of Mac, which I think we can probably live with.
Okay.
Just the only other thing, your comment on the transitional district, which was, I do understand, like, the points, I think, well taken on the idea of like, well, why do you wanna, by right allow a parking lot, but not by right allow a restaurant or a retail establishment? I don't wanna just be the parking lot guy, cause I understand my history there, but the reality is that, that those are like 2 of the most widely attended, and like there was a lot of community feedback. Not all of it was great, obviously. It's a little bit of it's a pretty impactful pen stroke to say all those transitional areas are allowed by right to be transformed into parking, and there's no real burden of the special use requirements, right, would lay out that you're not to create a nuisance and, especially you're to be a good steward of the community and your neighbors. If we're saying primary, we're saying, no, that doesn't apply. So
Well, we have a nice chapter just on parking standards and
Right,
that would probably help a lot of those concerns too. I get the point.
but yeah, off topic, but, one question I had was on these parking districts. Did we implement something where you can't have like an island house for parking? So like, right, so what I mean by that is like right now we're 3 lots deep, right? Let's say you have a lot that is four lots deep. In some cases, you have a house that's the 3rd lot deep. And then you can have parking on either side.
The fourth topic.
Yeah.
We did get that comment and in the final version, if it hasn't already been incorporated, we'll make sure that.
There's, you could just do a kind of like spot like zoning, but the challenge is it's not a zoning.
We have had in the past where we've had a commercial district, a house, and our parking. The house in between the two, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't have it anymore. But
We don't
that's what
wanna
we're
have
trying to
the hub
avoid.
house.
Yeah, well, it's like a chipped tooth.
But I am like, knowing that this is gonna involve some community, community feedback, I do feel like we'll get some there. We'll definitely get some for that. We'll just tell them that there's segment 12 parking and we'll get lots of involvement, which might be a good thing. Warrant might not be a great thing.
I love the community, I love engagement.
There we go. All right, are there any other commercial uses you guys would like to chat about?
So this list, it currently then, so it disallows like somebody who has like one haircutting chair in their basement and has clients over to cut hair at their house. And it disallows folks from like teaching piano lessons in their house. Is that something that we want to consider? Is it, am I just in the boat?
No, that's actually, at the very beginning of the table, home occupation.
Yeah, exactly. So I totally missed.
Thanks.
No, that's all. Are you writing a separate?
That feels like for life.
We have so many things enumerated and then, you miss the one, everything else, so.
Garage too, things like that, is that?
There's no signage.
We don't have any standards.
Sorry about that, thank you.
That might just maybe
Let's make a note of that and we can actually work on that draft together for.
Okay.
But thank you for looking out for the informal economy.
Yeah, there's actually a state law that says you can give like piano lessons and art lessons, like no matter what.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right.
But it doesn't apply to haircutting.
I don't have that problem.
Oh. I'm getting there.
Are there any other commercial uses you'd like to chat about?
Yeah, anything else that stuck out to you on, among the commercial uses that belong or don't, or belong in one place versus another?
I'm sorry, I have one short, hopefully quick question. The definition of a boutique hotel versus a regular hotel. Like,
Does that just mean it's like part of a chain or?
No, number of rooms, just number of rooms would indicate whether it's cheap.
Okay, so that's a standard definition.
Do we know what, we know that number?
Yes, under 80, I think.
So,
Not too boutique.
yeah, I don't think we'd have anything that wouldn't be classified as a boutique.
No, it's almost everything. that-
You wouldn't be able to.
I'm gonna check for sure. but I
Yeah.
think that's-
And so what, I mean, you can have, 80 keys, that can still be like
You
70,000.
could define it,
building,
and
I mean, that's
categorize it.
be a big,
Right. My point is, would we even have like, yeah. Where would we even have the footprint necessarily to accommodate, right? It's gonna be like this thing.
Does it make sense to keep? Should we remove it or modify it?
Well, all right, so that's in the,
CBD and CMU, so we're
Yeah, those-
back essentially.
yeah, in Jefferson, I think that's where it makes sense, where you're gonna run into some. It's not gonna be too much of a, it wouldn't do too large of a hotel on commercial, just because the lot sizes, we're gonna be really limited there. So I think that keeps us, my concern would be building something too big
Yeah.
there, but that solves itself, yeah.
Boutique, by the way, is
Yeah.
10 to 100 rooms.
Okay,
So that's the
So under 10's a bed and breakfast.
Most likely, yeah, that's.
If someone lives there.
Otherwise, it's
Just keep a short-term rental.
Warren's gotta go check every day.
Yeah, we'll get you a stamp, private eyes.
Shall we move on? Let's move on.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So that we heard that we're tabling our discussion on schedule regulations.
Yeah, I wanna fine tune that for Terry a little more.
Perfect.
Conventional.
And then we already discussed parking in this body, correct?
Not to what you've put forth here, no.
Okay.
But there's a lot of good stuff here.
Do you want to take that one, Liz?
Page 36. Or page 33 or 86. Page number correct.
I suppose the good stuff starts on page 39, the actual minimum number of spaces per unit. Or, I'm sorry, 38.
I disagree, actually.
Okay.
I think the good stuff, the most important thing in here, my opinion, also the most important thing, in page 37 or page 34 of 86, section 5.3, off-street parking requirements.
Okay.
You will see in letter A that in the NMU district, which is Charlottesville, and the CBD district, which is Charlottesville, no parking requirements anymore for for commercial uses, so non-residential. When someone wants to do something on Charlottesville or Charlottesville, there's no parking requirements.
Sorry.
Okay, that's a very, very important one.
That is.
And that is a trend. A.N. Arbor did away with parking requirements.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
There's, yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
It has to be that.
Yeah, I wanted to, so they are still on Mac. And
I think the benefit of that is it probably makes the actual responsibility of effective parking solutions back to this, right? Between city council, right, development authority, planning commission, right, instead of putting the burden on individual businesses, right, to have off-street parking, which
Just so I understand, so when you get to pages 38 and 39, and they list the parking, minimum parking for commercial uses, that's not NMU and not CBD.
correct,
Everything else.
correct.
but if you have a residential unit in that district, you have to have one spot per unit.
Right.
So if you're in CMU, you got a building with apartments and retail, you have to have one off-street spot.
And we'll get to how you can count that one street.
Yeah.
In a few moments, because it's not just you gotta put it on site.
Yeah, right.
The way I read this thing, you can do shared parking agreements and the like, or count nearby public lots too, so I think there's lots you can do.
So this spells out the minimum number. Is there a maximum number? Like, so, so maybe there's a scenario where someone's doing childcare in their house and there's a certain minimum, but they say, well, I need 6. And then they make their backyard into like a gravel parking lot or something. And that may or may not be what we want. But it appears that it's silent, this is silent on that.
No, there's still requirement in terms of how much of the lot can be turned into like non-permeable surface. There's a limitation. It's elsewhere, right? But there's actually.
In the schedule regulations.
Okay.
That's a good point. Usually, we do add a clause on a maximum parking requirement, so we can draft something and have it for you to review in October.
Okay.
Nothing else, we should reference those other standards, perhaps. So it's
Right, yeah.
governing it in some way.
But they do have some of that says, right, like, you know, the more restrictive, right, of is always essentially what prevails.
Yeah, that language.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to keep this very user friendly too, so if
Right,
somebody's
right.
coming in, they should know
Yeah,
where to look.
it shouldn't
for-
have to be,
Yeah,
you know, a reference of that.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we go through that list.
No, we're in the gallery, spare time.
So another item that we brought forward is allowing for flexibility in waiving the parking requirements, because we all know that parking requirements, the off-street parking requirements is kind of an arbitrary number. It's not really a science of how much a business might need, because it all depends on the demand and the location. So that's why we are, first of all, removed parking requirements for those commercial businesses. But then also, if we didn't get this number right in this off-street parking table, we afford for two options. And these are page 37 or 40 of your packet. And we offer the shared parking process and a parking waiver process. So let's look at this together. Michael, do you want to talk about the shared parking process? Just review what's on the.
Well, to be honest, I didn't write this one, I have to read the whole thing.
Well, we can still review it.
This is
This is,
Page 40. Or page 37 of the PDF.
All right, so for an applicant to engage in a shared parking process, they would have to submit an application and follow these standards in item 1A through E. So they'd have to provide an analysis of available use parking spaces and counts at certain times and type of hours, a sketch plan. They would also provide design standards throughout their application process. But essentially, the idea is for them to share a parking spot with a neighboring business that might have an overparked parking lot and not utilize their maximum parking spaces. And the way this process works is the planning commission would be the body that oversees it, or probably the director of public services in Grosse Pointe. I guess we can decide that. Who wants to oversee the shared parking process?
It's currently listed, planning commission approves shared parking arrangements.
Do you agree with that?
I think it's so procedural that if it meets if the agreement meets the standards that are adopted, it probably can just be the public service director and this.
And if it doesn't.
And then the waiver, which we'll get into next, is the planning commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that creates a situation for.
We don't want to have a meeting
We
over.
don't have to micromanage.
Can these people have already agreed to share parking, they meet the requirement, we're not really.
Because either we
doing a
will
job
be
at that
meeting
point.
a lot more, or every approval will take much longer.
Yeah.
Both of them seem like they're not the ideal outcome.
So the Director of Public Services approves the shared parking agreement. It's recorded with the city clerk and then also with the county register of deeds. So it lives on that parcel that business has contributed their shared parking or their parking to another business.
that would create easement on the property then?
Yeah, essentially. Okay, and then the other exciting thing to allow flexibility in the parking section is a waiver. And the Director of Public Services has the ability to waive 5 off-street parking spaces or less, provided that the parking doesn't make up 10% of the total required parking spaces. So that's just one avenue that we took to make sure that we're getting parking right, because we know that we are not made of magic or, it's not a science. Then we allow the planning commission to waive up to 100% of the total parking required, for an individual site, and they may attach conditions. And then for this process to work, there must be proof from the applicant. So they provide some of the items that I listed off previously for the shared parking agreement. And the process is they seek permission from planning commission. Do we have a public hearing for this?
So am I reading that right? So the director of public services may waive 5 off-street parking spaces, provided that the 5 spaces do not make up more than 10% of the total required. So
It's gonna be 50
Yeah.
space lot.
is that the right number? I mean, 50 spaces.
50 is a lot.
50 is a lot of, I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know how often that one would be used.
But does that mean that otherwise it just immediately goes to plan? I just want to make sure that, do we have the number set right so that Director of Public Services still has the authority to actually waive some of this instead of always having it basically come to Planning Commission? Because it's a 20, it's a 20 lot, requirement, and the Planning Commission can only waive, the Director of Public Services can only waive. Right. So maybe that.
So say 20, say 20% instead of 10.
Right.
We'll look at that one.
Yeah, I don't think we need to happen, but just something.
Yeah, I'm not doing the math in my head right now.
Yeah, just something to maybe think about so it doesn't, because this would
No, that's a great
always
catch.
automatically come here.
All right, and some.
For reference, this parking lot's like 50 spaces. Right, to think that somebody would be building something that would need a parking lot the size of City Hall, yeah, the function, the benefit of that one was just might not be worth the squeeze.
Right. And maybe it's not a percent, maybe you just say can waive up to X number, whatever, I'm sure you'll.
Yeah.
Figure
We'll
something out.
wordsmith it.
We'll be in touch. Some communities require a public hearing for a business to waive their parking at planning commission. Do you guys want to have a public hearing, or are you guys okay with just having a public meeting?
I mean, most things we do, whether it's a rezoning, a site, what about site plan? Special land use and rezonings always get or amendments to the ordinance always get public hearings, state law. Do site plans need to be noticed like that, or? Okay, and they're not proposed now. I think it's not really matter, because they meet all the requirements of the site plan, you gotta approve it anyway, but I think that's a
What a
condition.
public hearing does, it notifies the
It
residents.
basically really only says that we're sending notices out to. Yeah, we'd probably just use the standard state law, which is, for any other thing, it's 300 feet radius
I think it makes sense to do a public hearing.
for waivers.
Yeah.
Just because it's such a.
Just and we can, that way we're transparent about everything and let everybody make their voices heard.
The hearing in this case, right, it would function the same as essentially.
Right, the notice is the only thing that.
The notice is the difference, which is,
Which I agree,
is
that's the only-
increased transparency to actually
Yeah.
sending something out.
Yeah.
Right,
You can add
especially
that.
if this is something that people might actually get behind, it'd be nice to actually.
Well, it's been made very clear that's part of it.
Right.
So we should be over communicating, we should be.
Even when it's
Yeah.
good news and things. that-
Yeah,
that ultimately
they might
have
be
a
like,
lot of
yes,
support.
thank you,
It'd be kind of nice.
we don't want a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yes, we- right,
Yeah,
And to the point where we're structured.
right. Be careful.
Okay. Assistant City Manager, is there any other items in the parking section?
No, I wanted to hit waivers, the just blanket exemption, and that was essentially it. Everything else is pretty
Yeah,
standard.
the layouts,
Layouts and
van accessibility. Pretty straightforward.
Chair, is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
I think we can move on to that section.
Okay, well, that wraps up the sections that we have to present today.
You gave us signs.
It does.
Are we not-
You gave us signs. Yeah, that's the other one I was looking at.
Yeah, that's the only other one.
That one,
We wanted to,
I don't know how much we actually need to discuss on signs. We
I
talked a lot
remember the
about
last
signs.
time.
Last time.
Yeah, I can't, I walk past things now and I'm like, it's a monument sign. I never thought I would actually.
You can identify them now.
Yeah.
there is one thing, but we can save it for the next meeting, but we can do it now. And it's about signs in residential, please.
Sounds fun.
That's a
It's election season. Let's talk about it.
Yes. So currently, we really don't have any regulations.
What page
that
is
are-
this on?
66, or, sorry, that's the table, 65 is the table, or 50.
What I'm about to discuss is actually on the bottom of page 61 of the document, page 46 of 86. There's a little line under section 8.3 general standards. It's the very last thing, number 11. Yard signs. What we got right now, no more than 12 square feet of total signage. No limit on the number of signs, just the total number of size. So if you got more than 12 square feet of signs, whether it's I love my neighbor, vote for candidate X, happy people live here. None of those, you can have all three messages. They cannot exceed 12 square feet. That's what we got now, or be taller than 4 feet. So that's what we got now. We might want to fine tune this.
We can't support more than 2 political candidates, for example.
Well, and so here's the thing with the political signs. Yeah, we have regulations, but they're all content based.
Yeah.
And any content based regulation, which is what our entire sign ordinance is now, cannot be enforced. So I know, I know it can feel like the Wild West, and until we adopt this, we'll continue to be the Wild West.
And I didn't mean to sound cheeky about it, but so this though, like if a standard political sign is 2 by 2 or 2 by 3, something like that. So like really you can't, right, if we adopt this, you can support, 2 or 3 candidates for all the elected offices.
I'm sorry, the 12 square feet per sign?
No, total.
Yeah.
So you could have what,
Way
6 by 2,
amount of-
6 foot tall by 2 feet wide. That's as big as you. That's clearly big.
It's not gonna be higher than 4 feet, so.
Yeah, that's true. It can't be higher than 4 feet. There we go.
Yeah, just a 4 by 3
Uh-huh.
sign.
It's just, certain times of year that could be really restrictive.
I think it makes sense to have to regulate the size of an individual sign. But I think 12 square feet for total signage, then you're limiting the number of candidates. I mean, if you got, a lot of big vote coming up on a lot of different seats, you gotta then really pick your horse on who gets a sign, or you gotta change them out or something to.
Maybe there's a way to carve out exceptions, without being content based, I guess it would be hard to do.
I like the Rush Shores is a decent one, where they have, they have size requirements, but they also have no more than 5 signs. I don't know if that's
Something like that
too
could make-
less, but we can. I wanted to propose this today, see what we thought, and then come back, because right now, we don't have anything we can enforce.
But do I understand things correctly that the size thing is really the only thing that's enforceable on political signs?
Correct.
Okay.
And location, so it must be so far back from the sidewalk, or, you couldn't put, if this is your property line, if you want to, and let's say you're the candidate you didn't like and was living right here, and you wanted to say, ha-ha signs, you got to put them back, freedom of speech, you can put the ha-ha signs there, but hey, you got to put them like 3 feet back from any of your lot lines. You can't put them right on.
So you can enforce the placement in your yard and the size, but
yes.
nothing else.
And you're
Yeah.
saying
I
size.
have to read it to understand if the regulation applies.
Or the total aggregate size.
And that goes for all sides.
Yeah.
Not
Not
just
just political signs, but like if it's, like we have sections that talk about real estate signs, nope, that's, you gotta read it. Content-based regulation, we cannot, and this is written, these are written in a way that is, content neutral, if that's the right word.
That's a real one for it, because then if you're selling your house, then you can't, right? Because then if you for sale or rent, right? No,
There's
the
your
next,
square footage.
that's even when you're 12 feet. Yeah. Like Bloomfield, sign can only be black and bronze. So if you have a listing in Bloomfield Hills, you have to get a black and bronze sign. That's not that's allowed. That's allowed stuff. Yeah. But, I think that the direction to go in is regulating the size of an individual sign and probably the number.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, no, we'll take a closer look at that one, but I know it's that time of year, and next year we may have 4 elections, so
It's just also,
all the primaries factored in, so it's gonna.
yeah, I like the idea of size of an individual and number of signs, 'cause
And again, like I said, that's what the Shores did, they have both in the inner. And I think they even say you can't put it, within 3 feet of a property line, so it's gonna be at least 3 feet off the sidewalk or 3 feet away from
see
you.
someone putting up 12 1-by-1 spite signs.
A different word on every.
Yes.
one.
And then you'll have to, your same inspector's gonna have to go around and measure all of them. Yeah, but I think if we have a reasonable number of signs you're limited to, yeah, let them do it.
Right, yeah.
All right, anything else on signs?
I had to bring it up while we.
We do know that you have a notorious
It's-
passion for science.
Oh, no, I don't, but the community has a notorious passion for political science. So we want to make sure we get it right. It's something we can actually enforce.
Anybody have any other thoughts? No? All right, I think now that's all the items, that you prepared, right?
Michael, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
We've covered all.
Yeah, we did a really good job. Thank you for your collaboration today.
Thank you.
Thanks for being
You
here.
made a great ordinance. This is fantastic. Well, thanks for having us. I think we're talking next meeting, right?
Yes, we need to, yes, so you'll have to get your calendars ready too,
Okay.
because if you're not here, we need you.
All right,
Okay.
so. Is there any other?
No, there's
No more, that's all our new business, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to item 7, public comment on non-agenda items. Any members of the public still with us who would like to make comment on non-agenda items? Going once, going twice. All right, and then,
Schedule our meetings real quick.
yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to do 2 things. We need to have a discussion on short-term rentals. And that's probably a single issue meeting. I'd like to get that scheduled. And our next regular meeting is not actually conveniently, it's the day after the election. But I don't want to wait that long to continue to work on this ordinance. I'd like to have a second meeting in October if we could, where we continue this, the rest of the chapters will be drafted. So we'll want to make sure it's not like the first week of October, so we can actually finish drafting all the chapters. And then we also want to be, have that conversation on the short-term rentals. So, and I've tried to do the poll with you guys. We can never find a day all together. So I'm like, let's just do it right now. Everybody get your calendar out. And the only thing to keep in mind is our absent member, Dr. Taylor, she has classes this semester on Wednesday nights. So we could actually maybe look at maybe Thursday, Tuesday nights. She could be here too. That was something she asked us to consider. And I think that's worthwhile.
I've got commitments, a recurring commitment every Wednesday as well.
Right, so I mean, I don't know if for short-term rentals, if we want, today's date is, we want to target the Thursday, October 12th for that one. Because I'm out of town the 9th, 10th, and 11th that week, so otherwise it's kind of any time in October after October 12th is when we could probably be doing these 2 meetings, so.
The 12th works for me.
12th is good.
Well, we're good for me too.
It's my wedding anniversary.
Bring your husband to the meeting.
Right.
Very public comment. We certainly will have to do the 12th, but
I'll do my best.
Warren, is this something that you're looking for McKenna?
not necessarily this one
Okay.
to attend, so, but I may need some research that we can work together on, but I'm thinking I can do a lot of this,
Okay.
in-house.
Yeah, we can assist as needed.
Yeah.
It would be, so the zoning ordinance is one thing, but yeah, we will continue our getting this assistance.
Yeah. Sure.
Thanks for having us. We're happy to go.
So we want to pencil in the 12th for our short-term rental discussion. Do we want to do 7? Do you want to do earlier? Do you, if it's, I don't know how long it'll go. I don't, I'm not trying to suggest we, if someone works for everybody, that's fine. I'm just saying that if you want to do all meet at 6:30 or whatever, whatnot. It doesn't matter to me. 7's good.
I'm not opposed to some.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, we'll do 7. Make an anniversary cake for your uncles over here. And then so the zoning ordinance now. So now is when we'll definitely do McKenna's availability. I don't know if we want to do that the following week, if we want to wait until the week of October 23rd,
I cannot do the following week.
the week of the 16th. You're saying that's out for you. That's okay. Anybody got day on the 23rd through 27th? Tuesday the 24th? That look good for people? Could you do that? Okay.
Tuesday the 24th?
Yeah, it's worth it.
Okay. Sounds like a quorum, so we'll proceed. So we'll do it. I'll send out and I'll update the city's calendars, whatnot. We'll do the 12th, short-term rentals at 7, the 24th, more zoning ordinance. We'll stick with 7 for that one. And then the next one after that has been scheduled since the beginning of the year. That's November 8th, day after the election.
Wow, blitz for us here, yeah.
Okay.
That's why I needed to get taken care of.
Well, great job, everybody. So that moves us to item number 8, which is adjournment of tonight's meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Commissioner Stackey, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll give it to Commissioner Evans. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.